Hello, Embird users. This is WeQuilt Studio coming to you with another Studio Next video. And this one is a long-awaited video on the mesh and actually how to get a gradient effect when using mesh. And it's really easy now in Studio Next, but it's not very intuitive as to how to do it. You'll recall that long time ago, like in the old days, when we wanted mesh, we did this down here. I'll hit Control 1 to zoom in. Okay, so this object, if you look over in the inspector window, is just a fill object. It has no underlay, and I created it first just to see how it would generate, and you can kind of, I don't have it down there in editable stitches, but when it first generated, it generated in two parts because like usually Embird knows that when you do a fill, you start at, say, at the bottom and go up, but then you stop kind of 2/3 of the way, and then you go up here and travel down to meet your existing stitches. That's so that the fabric doesn't push, push pull, so it doesn't push, because if you start at the bottom and end at the top, say if you did have a circle, your circle is not even going to be round, and so on and so on. But I actually saw that it generated in two parts, and I actually did edit over here. I saw where I wanted to start and stop it. So I saw that it wanted to start down here, and I saw that it wanted to end up there, and so I just clicked on this node, right click, place start point here, and then came up here, right click, place end point here, and hit the check mark and generate, and it generated this second time in one complete object here in the inspector window. That doesn't always happen. If it's a complex shape with a lot of ins and outs, that may not happen, but in this case it did. And if I click on the object and go into params, sometimes that happens if you just like click on something else and then click again on the object and then go into params. Okay, fill is up here. So what you'll see is that for one thing, when I go into, you see I have it at 180, and there was a reason for that. I'll just go through the tabs. No underlay, make cover stitches, use jumps. So that's so that it would use jumps, so I wouldn't have these connecting stitches showing. And this I just left at default. And then here's my gradient, and I chose gradient 1. And it's just like in regular Studio. I could have checked 2 to get, a more drastic look, but I chose 1. And the gradient is 5 mils, and that's like the spacing between everything. If I were to change this, if I click on gradient and change it to say 2 mils and hit apply, okay, it's tighter. So I liked it at the 5 mils. Now hit enter twice just to get out of there, and then hit apply. Okay. And so But normally, if I wanted, say, this denser part to be at the top, I would come over here and this would be set at 0. So this angle, if I hit apply, I should have moved this over more. You'll see the densities at the top. Let me just hit done so that I could move this over. Usually when this right side is halfway between this flat tab, then you'll be able to see everything. So I'll go back into params. So you could do something like that. And on my fill, I also have my spacing set at 6.0 because that is going to affect things as well. If I left the spacing, say, at the default of 0.4, now remember in Studio Regular, this would read 4, okay, not 0.4. So Studio Next is actually more realistic. This is really what we're dealing with. So if I hit apply, you could see that makes it tighter. So I just chose the 0.6 because I just liked the way it looked. So there's a lot of things that can affect your gradient when you're using the fill. I'll go back to 180 the way it was. Okay. And I'll hit done. Now that was using the fill. And then I came up with these custom ESM motifs. This is just basically a straight line custom ESM. And I kind of got the same effect, only my edges are a little different, and I have this outline over it, and you could see I have a bit of editing to do in just the stitches. This would be something where I would go convert to editable stitches. That's as if we're in editor and we can edit the stitches, and then I would edit this just right here in Studio, you know, bring this stitch over, what have you, add a couple of stitch points and try to tuck this in here. Sometimes you want something like this to, you know, just to look a little different. So for these parameters, we'll go into params. My spacing is still at 0.6. Now the angle says negative 180, but if you click on this, it's 180. It depends on like where you started. So if it was on 0 and you came all the way over, see, I came down too far, so now I'm in the negatives. It's as if I started here and came negative. And if I stop right at the 180, I get negative 180. But if I start at 0 and come all the way over and just don't pass that, it says positive 180. Either one is the same position. So positionally, negative 180 and 180 are the same. So just don't get confused with that as far as this tab for spacing. So this is just one of my sketch motifs that you can buy on my website. And remember, to get to these custom ESM motifs or outlines in Studio Next, it's not here on your parameters screen like it is in Studio Regular. It's actually in what they call fragment editors, and this window is hiding it. So let me hit done. But this category, it has fragment editors in it. That's user editors in Studio Regular. So it's the same thing. So you'd have to first go to fragment editors, go up here, click the three blue dots, open sample, and you would, navigate to your folder where you're keeping all your ESMs. See, I'm in outlines, ESM outlines. So I'll go back to Embird ESM files on my computer. You only have to click once. ESM motifs. Here you see I have Lorna's, the ones that are on Lorna's Facebook group. And then my favorite motifs. And then I think these are under sketch. Yeah. So I have like different stitch lengths and stuff. And I believe this was the one I used. And so you would just click on it. And there it is. And then that would be in number 1. And then if you wanted to add more, you would go and click on number 2. And then add a slot in number 2, open. So I would replace number 2. So say I wanted that one in. And so now those two would be at 1 and 2. And so then I would click done. Now these other ones, they must have been some of my previous ones. So I'll hit done. And then when I go back into params, you could see it didn't bring it up. So I'll click somewhere else and click it again. Params. Okay. Wants to be fussy with me. So I'll click it. Click params again. Interesting. Not sure why it's doing that. Let me click on like a different one. Okay, there's the fill for that one. Okay. So I'll click params and then fill over here. And so at any rate, you'll see that I have the spacing is the same, the angle is the same, so that it actually, the gradient gets flipped and the denser part is down here. And this is just if you want to add more motifs, just like in Studio Regular. I do have used jump stitches for long jumps, but for some reason it doesn't really listen to that command. It's still using these to get around. So you could see it's traveling on the outside edge. These row shift and scale and this stitch length are what I digitized when I created the ESM file. You can change them if you want your stitch length bigger, but just know, or smaller, and your row shifts and so on. I have them shifted so that they look more like this. Just know that this, if you change it in this window here, it's not going to be set in stone the next time you open this window. It goes back to the defaults that I set. That's why I make so many ESM files with different parameters here. So that's that tab. And then here's your gradient tab. And this gradient is more dense at the top, just like with the fill. The reason I put this at 180 was so that my dense part would be at the bottom. You could see the dense part is at the bottom. However, you'll notice that it's not as dense at the bottom as, say, the fill was over here. The fill was more dense at the bottom. And I'll get to the wave in a minute. I forgot to address that on the other one. But the gradient on here, to get this to match this one somewhat, I had to make the gradient really small. Whereas the gradient on the fill, and let me click done, and I'm going to zoom out so I could get them both in view. Okay, I'll go back in. Okay, so the gradient on the fill, it was bigger. It was bigger than 2 mils on the fill to get the same spacing. To be honest, what I did with this was on the circle above each of these, this circle has the same params as this down below. So I'll actually try and keep both of them in view. This part might not be in, but you can see my wave. Let me zoom out one more with my negative sign. Okay. So you can see that between the two, between using it as a fill or as a custom ESM motif, the density on the fill, or they call it spacing, it was 0.6 when I used the fill. But to get the same spacing with the custom ESM motif, I had to use 0.2. You can see. And the angle was the same. The angle was at 180 for both of them. The gradient on here, on the fill, I had to use 5 mils. But to get that same kind of spacing, I had to use 2 mils for the custom ESM. So you just kind of have to play with it. And also the wave, you see, I didn't even show the wave tab. But to get this wave to kind of follow the circle and follow this, well, for the fill, I had to make the wave 50 mils. In other words, it was stretched up and down, 50 mils. But for the custom ESM, I only had to stretch it 30 mils to get the same curve. So I'll show you that, the wave, which I did forget to show that. So we're on this one here. I click params. And sometimes that happens, the overall just shows, and I'm not sure why it keeps doing that. Sometimes if I click it again or click something else and click this again and go into params, then I see the word fill there, and I can click on it. And the fill I'm using is actually a motif fill, this one. But this last tab, so we were on this tab, the gradient at 2.0. The last tab is the wave, or effect tab, either none or wave. With motifs, you only get to choose a wave. And my wave on here is 30, but my wave on the fill was actually 50. I actually brought it up, higher, all the way up to 50. Sometimes this doesn't go all the way, so you just click on the number. But for the motif, to get the same, and I'll right click to bring it down, to get the same curve, I chose 30. So, and you can see too, with the mouse or whatever down here, same params, it doesn't even look as dense down here as it does up here or with the fill. And, you know, you can play with that if you want more density down here. I think what you have to do for the custom ESM is, let's go back to that and hit params. Okay, so if I were to lower my spacing, I might be able to get, say if I went 0.5 and hit apply, I might be able to get it to look tighter down here. It looks a little tighter. Okay, not much. So let me go back up to the 0.6. Hit apply. Give it a minute. There we go. Okay. So you go through your tabs and you'd be like, well, what do I want? How do I want to get that denser? Well, there's a couple things you could do. You could mess with your scale, maybe make it tighter, maybe make it 80%. I can try my gradient a little bit smaller. So instead of 2.0, I can go say 1.5. That's really getting small. And hit apply. You know, and it still doesn't look really much tighter down here. It doesn't look like this one. So, and I think I did try that. So I'm going to go back to the 2 and hit apply. And it could be too that because my wave is at 30, I could try it at say 40 and see if that just makes it look tighter, because this one is a little bit tighter. Maybe 30 wasn't right. Maybe it should have been 40. Okay. I see a little bit more density down there. And you'll notice that I don't have the outline going all the way around anymore. So this is something where you'd have to put an outline around this to make it look perfect. But at any rate, so the other thing I could do is I could try going all the way up to 50. I may have not liked it at 50. That might have been why I did 30. Okay. That does show a little bit more down here, a little bit, not really, not as much as here. And, but actually the density is almost the same. I'm going to actually leave this at 50, but I'm going to go to the scale, motif size, and I'll make the scale, say, 80% and see if I get it more dark down here. Okay, that just actually made everything, you know, tighter. I see a little bit more darkness. It looks a little bit closer to this, but you can see I can't get these two to look exactly alike. And you know, I mean, that's pretty close. I thought about changing this, but that's just my stitch length. That's the width of the stitches for this particular motif. If I stretch out my gradient to maybe 3, okay, so I'm kind of, you know, I see it a little bit tighter down here. It looks a little closer to that. So, you know, they're just two different animals, basically. But you kind of get the idea. You kind of mess with the gradient. I messed with the scale and so on, and I messed with the wave. So, but here's the thing, all of this can be rectified by just using the mesh in Studio Next. And you can see up here where I actually used the mesh. I started with just a mesh 47 with a ripple, and these are my params. And then I show you how I then came to this one down here. You know, I came along and changed it and changed and changed and added more params, and I came to this. And then that's kind of how I decided on this pumpkin. I used the mesh for the pumpkin. So it is just a little bit easier. You always get a perfect side. You get just everything is perfect right from the start, and you don't have to mess with your stitches, your actual stitches in, say, editor, or in here using convert to editable stitches and so on. And you don't have stragglers like you would with the fill and so on. The only thing with the mesh is you get 2 layers of stitches. With these two, with the fill and the motif, you'll just get 1 layer of stitches. So that may or may not be something you want, because sometimes when you get 2 layers of stitches, they don't go completely over the previous, and it doesn't really look good. You know, if you don't hoop correctly, or if your design is really complex, or what have you. So you have a lot of options, but I'm going to show you how the gradient works with the mesh. So we'll start up here with just this circle. So I just made a circle. I'll just kind of show you off to the side. I just clicked on mesh here. You could click on fill and then convert it to a mesh, but I'll just click on the mesh tool. Wait for the screen to... This is going to be slow because I have so much going on. So, okay, so the screen changed. I'll click once, click shape, ellipse. You could do 16 elements, it doesn't matter. Hold control and I'll draw my circle. And you don't have to click on that dot to draw your circle. You could draw it anywhere. And then I'll hit enter. And there's my circle. And then from there, I would just go into params with it selected. It took a while to, let me make sure that that's gonna render correctly. Okay, so now I'll click on params. And actually, I'm sorry, let me hit done. I'm going to kind of move this down, move this one up. And then move everything over. Just so I can see my settings here as I do this. Okay, so I'll go into params. Okay, so this is just the default window. So to get this mesh 47, that was the one that I requested to Embird, and they did deliver. That's under tiles, so the mesh mode is tiles, and the category is black work. And then I'll click here, and I'm going to look for mesh 47, which is almost at the bottom. I'll wait for it to populate. So here at 44, don't click in here. Click this arrow to page down. This page is down more than one page. So click this arrow once, and then you may have to wait, and there's 47. And so here's my parameters for this. I did it at 60% because at 100% the mesh would be really far apart. So I click on scale, click in here, Control A, 60, hit enter twice to get out of this box and then out of that window. And then that's my scale. And then the only other thing I added to it was a ripple that gave me this curve. So the ripple tab is here. It's an effect. So the kind of effect I want is ripple. And you'll notice that that ripple is an S. And I only want half of it. I don't want the S. I just want a curve. So if I only want half of this, my count, the number of these, would be a half. So click here, Control A, 0.5, enter, enter. And my range here is the distance between, say, the top of this S and this bottom here, like that vertical distance. So the range, the default range is 10 mils, so that would be a distance of 10 mils. Well, I kind of want my curve to follow the curve of the circle. So since my circle, like this circle, if you look down here, is about 90 mils in diameter. And these down here, they were 80. Okay. So I want my curve to be like half a circle. So I kind of want my range to be half of whatever the circle is. Well, this circle was 80, so my range here was half of 80, which is 40. This circle is 90, half of 90 is 45. So I click on range and click in here, Control A, 45, enter, enter, and that's my range. And then that was all that I used to get this effect. Just ripple and these two numbers. So then I'll click apply. I forgot to do one thing. I forgot to set the stitch length. That's this tab. So let's let that apply, and then I'll change it again. Okay, and there it is. And it looks perfect. Let me check my, because the defaults here of 0.7 and 4.0, I don't usually like those. So I usually set them to 2.2 max and 1.5 min. 2 layers, that's the one thing with mesh. You get 2 layers. Include contours. You want checked so that you don't get little connection lines in between. You'll get just an outline around the outside. And then I'll just click apply again. Okay, and I'm just going to hit my plus sign just to zoom in a hair. Maybe get a little bit better of a, actually now we don't have the whole thing in, so let me zoom out again. So then say, what if I want this gradient here, as in this circle? You could see it's a little bit tighter down here. Well, to add a gradient, all you have to do is you go to the transformation tab here and you use perspective. For me, I want the vertical perspective. So I basically want this design stretched out. Well, the blue one, I'll just stick with the blue one. I want it stretched out, and I want a tightness on one vertical end or the other. And so all I did was I played with the percentage on the perspective of how much I wanted it stretched out. So I'll just click on this arrow and I put in 75. If you click here on one of these, then you only have to hit enter once to get out of there. I think because I already clicked in here, I have to hit it twice. So now if I wanted the dense part to be up at the top, I would make this perspective a negative 75%. So I would just click here and click there and put in a negative sign. So, but for right now, we'll just leave the density at the bottom. And I'm leaving the angle at 0. So really throughout all these examples, I didn't change the angle of the transformations. I left it at 0. So I'll click apply. And there you go. And you've got your beautiful gradient. It's nice and smooth. It's even. It's just really nice. It just transitions quite well. And so let's just click done. And we'll zoom in on that by hitting Control 1. And there it is. It's just beautiful. It's perfect. And I'll hit my plus sign to zoom in more. I'll just hold it down and you could see the stitches are just beautiful. And that's because I set the stitch length. And this is 2 layers, remember, of stitching. And if you ever wanted to see for sure what's going on with the stitches, you can always click on it, and you might want to make a copy of it. Let's see, I think it makes its own, but let me do Control C, Control V just in case. Okay, and I'll click on the second one. If you really want to see what's going on with the stitches, you'll hit Convert to Editable Stitches. Okay, it makes one. I didn't have to copy it. I couldn't remember. So this is the editable stitches as if you were an editor. So I'm going to hold this eye and hide that one. And I'm going to click on this one. And I'm going to click this magnifier and just draw a box so I could just zoom in on the stitches here. And if I hit edit, I have my fabric showing. Okay. If I click on one of these stitch points now, these are stitch points. That's why you see this over here. This is as if we were an editor. If I click that and move it away, you could see there's more stitches underneath. And these actually, they're not on top of each other. And I'm not sure if it's because it's curved that it's doing that. Okay, click on one. Okay, so it was right on top. Okay, that makes me feel better. Now these aren't up here, but that's the outline, the contour. That's understandable. But these are right on top of each other. So it's because we curved it, they're not going to be on top of each other. So that's something new that I just discovered. So I'll go ahead and delete this, and I'll bring this back and delete that. So let's just hit Control A and then Control 1. So let's go ahead and I'm going to concentrate on these two, the orange and the green. So I'm going to just click outside, and I'll click the magnifier over here, and that lets me draw a box around what I want to magnify. Okay, and then I do want them both to show, but before I zoom out a little and go into params, and actually I kind of want this blue one to show as well, so because this is the one that we're going to change. Grab the plus sign to move it. Okay, but if you look at this green one, you'll notice that I still have a gradient, but the dense part is up on top. And the way that I was able to get the dense part on top was just by making the perspective negative. So here it's positive, so it's at the bottom, the dense part. Here it's negative, so the dense part is at the top. The other thing you might notice is that when I did that and brought it up to the top, I got a space up here. Now remember, my ripple is still at angle 0. I didn't put that here, but my ripple is at angle 0 here and here. So that means that I have a smile. Okay. And because I have that smile, and because I put my dense part up here, for some reason that kind of didn't allow more density to come up here. Okay, so, or just the fact that I have my angle so steep, and you know, the concave part of it can't fill in. You know, for whatever reason, it didn't fill in up here. So let me go ahead and get this look up here. So I'm going to zoom out. And one more time with my negative sign, and I'll move this over so that this is right here. So we'll click on this one, and the only thing we're going to change is we're going to give it a negative 75 perspective so that the density is up at the top. So with it selected, where is it over here? Let's see. Oh, it's at the bottom. That's right. We'll click params. And this just keeps happening to me over and over, even after I restarted the program. It's not showing up. So try it again. I'm trying to figure out why that keeps happening. I'll click something else and click it and hit params. Still not showing up over here. I'll click the screen and then click it. Like I said, I don't know if it has to catch up with okay, so maybe clicking the screen and then clicking it did it, I don't know. But at any rate, so my scale is still at 60%, meaning I have a little bit tighter spacing than 100% on my black work. And my ripple is the same. I haven't changed anything there. So it's still got a range of 45 mils. It's still curved, you know, 45 mils. And that means, you know, you be like, that's pretty big. Well, just think about it. This this whole curve is half the S. So this curve, if you know, if this is the bottom of the S down here, say, oh, I can't pull down a line, but if this is the bottom of the curve at, say, we'll start at like, say, 240 is the bottom. Well, then the top of that curve would be like way up here at like 280, 40 to 80. So it's about 45, 40 to 85, say. It's a 45 range. So you have to kind of remember that we don't have the entire S shape even showing. Whoops. And we only want half of it to show. So the other half is invisible. But this still takes into account that other half. So it, it can get a little confusing. But at any rate, this is the same. That's the same, of course. And then our perspective, now instead of 75, we're going to make it a negative 75. Click negative sign, enter, to bring our density up to the top. And I'll hit apply. Okay, and so you can see my density is up at the top, but I've got a gap up there, just like this one. So what do we do? Well, let's click done. And let's move this over. And let's move these over. So now you can see that what is different between these two descriptions? Well, in this one, I decided, okay, so this was just what I wanted to do. So I haven't addressed the gap yet, but I did decide that I wanted it to be more dense and less dense. I wanted it to be more dramatic. Okay, so instead of a perspective of negative 75, I decided to stretch it out more and have a negative perspective of 100% instead of 75. That just stretches it out more. So you see I have more of a difference between the loose and dense. Still negative, still the density is at the top, but the number stretches it out more. So that's what we'll do on this one. We'll just, instead of 75, we'll make it negative 100. So let's see if I can click params and get to, yeah. So let's hit done. It's not showing. Let's click on the screen and then click there and see. Nope. Maybe, like I said, it just needs to catch up, but I did increase my RAM. Yeah, I don't know if it's my design has too many objects in it and it's just overwhelmed. That could be it. I might have to go out and come back in. Just hit save that way as well. Okay, so I came back in, I zoomed in, and this is what we're going to try to achieve. A negative 100 as opposed to negative 75 so that we can stretch it out more. So let me click on that. Okay, so there it is, mesh. And we'll go to the transformation tab, perspective. I'll click this, click backspace, 100. So negative 100 or 100 is the most you can stretch it out. So we'll click the check mark and I'll hit apply. Maybe it uses up a certain amount of RAM or a certain amount of, well, I have a lot of hard drive space as well, so I'm not sure why I had to come back in. So if you watch it, you'll see that when this grayness goes away, this will be stretched out more. Okay, and so you can kind of see it. It's got a more definite difference between the two. And so I'll just click done. And so now let's address the fact that we've got this gap up here. Let me first zoom in on it so you could see it better. Okay. So there it is. And I'll zoom out. Just click my minus button. And if you hold your right mouse button too, you get the hand and you can just drag the screen. Doesn't really move the screen, but it's, you know, the pan. So I'm going to move this over. Okay. Give it a minute. I just clicked on the screen. Okay. So now, if you'll look at the difference between the two, between the green and the black, in the description, everything is the same. We're at -100 on the perspective, but you'll see on the transformation tab, I added an offset of 10 mils. How did I know to set the offset to 10 mils? Well, I came over to this design and let me just click on it and I'll hit Control 1. And then I was like, okay, if I just take my cursor down at the bottom and look over to the side, or if I grab this and look to the side, I see it's at 165. And then up here, if I either grab this, I'm at like 175, say. 165 to 175. That's 10 mils. So it's like I'm shifting this up 10 mils. So that's what I did to get this. So let's zoom out again. I'll just use this to zoom out. And actually, since this one is a little bit bigger, it might be a little more than 10 mils. I could go ahead and measure it. It might be 12 mils, but I'm just going to put in 10 for the sake of a round number. It's probably still going to fill it all in. If it doesn't, then I'll either measure it or go up to 12 or what have you. Okay. So I'll click on it. Params. Mesh. Transformation tab. And here's my offset. So I just want the vertical offset because I just want it to move vertically. Generally, you choose one or the other. You always want to change one variable at a time. In this case, the vertical would work just fine. So I'll click on the arrow, click in here, Control A, 10, enter, enter, and hit apply. You don't really want to mess with skew too much. It can really mess you up. It's a little harder to get what you want with skew, but sometimes you want to use it. But in this case, no. We're just going to use perspective, and then if that doesn't work, we use offset. We add offset to it. Now that did seem to work just fine. It looks beautiful. So I'll click done. And I'll hit Control 1. And there you go. Now, you know, if that's too dense, you can adjust things. You can say make it farther apart. So maybe instead of we don't want to really mess with the ripple because we want the ripple to follow our circle, and we only want half, and we want it to be 40, or ours is 45 mils. We don't want to change the angle, but you can kind of mess with the scale of the design. If I wanted this to be not so dense, I can go ahead and make the scale, instead of 60, I could make it, say, 75. There we are again. We're back to that. Let me click the screen. Okay, see, it took a little longer, so I knew it was going to show the mesh. Okay, so right here, our scale, we could maybe make it, you know, 75, or even 100 is going to be really too much. It'll be too wide. I mean, for my taste, but it depends on what you're looking for. So I guess I'll just go to 80 just to get closer to 100 and hit apply. And so, you know, everything's going to be farther apart. So this will be farther apart, these will be farther apart, and so on. And so there you go. So, you know, you get a totally different look. And I actually like that better. This really didn't seem farther apart. It just seemed to transition really in a cool way, like almost like an eyeball looking up from the side view or something. I do like that. I thought these would be farther apart, but because we have so many other variables at play here, we have our perspective at 100, so we're really stretching it out. Remember, if this perspective were, say, at 50 or 75, we wouldn't have this would blend more. Okay, so if I click apply now, I hope I'm right. I'm saying it before the fact, and okay, yeah. Oh, and I put it at regular 75 instead of negative. So let me put the density up at the top, because that's going to give you a totally different look. See how these are smaller curves? It's going to look really dense now when I put it up at the top. There you go. And that's beautiful too. They're all beautiful. So you may say, you know, I really like it when it's up at the top. The density is up at the top where the curves are shorter, you know, horizontally they're shorter. I like that. And then you may say, well, what does it look like if I make the ripple upside down? Well, the ripple now, let me get my notes to make sure I tell you the right thing. Okay, the ripple angle determines if it's arcing upward or downward. Let me show you my Word doc on this. Okay, and you could screenshot this. But the ripple angle determines if it's arcing upward. I don't know if that's spelled right. Oh, I think it's, I don't know, CH. If anyways, the ripple angle determines if it's arcing upward, 0 degrees for upward, or downward, 180 degrees for downward. And this tells you about perspective, positive or negative. Perspective stretches it, so either 100 positive or negative stretches it out to its max. The sign, its sign, positive or negative, determines if the heavy density is at the bottom, that's positive 100, or at the top, that's negative 100. So between the ripple and the perspective, you can have a lot of control. And don't forget, then you have your offset if it doesn't fill in. You also have your scale at the very beginning, the scale of the actual mesh. So there's a lot at play here. So we're going to go back and change the ripple to 180 to get the smile to be upside down. So it's at 0 now, we're on ripple. I'm going to put it at 180. Should I get the other one where I liked it at negative 100? Enter, where I liked it, where it looked really cool up there. Let me just show it again. I'll put it back to 0, just so you could see the difference. So I'm not changing two variables. So it's at 0 the way it was, and it was at, when I put it at negative 100, I believe that's what I did. And click apply. That gave us, where it looked like an eyeball. It stretched it out more and gave us not such a smooth transition. Okay. For some reason it looked better before. Scale at 80. Did I have a scale at 60 before I changed that? Honestly, I don't remember. I'll go to 60 just to be sure. And then if not, I'll go back to 80 and then we'll flip the smile upside down. I mean, this can get very confusing. Sometimes if you like something, it's better to copy and paste it and start another one, so that you don't forget what you put down, or write down. It's a pain to write it down, though. Okay, there it was at 60. So I'll just go back to 80. I guess that's how I had it. Because at 80, it seemed to make this dense part smaller. It seemed to be up here. Yeah, it was up there tighter. See, now it looks good again. So I don't know. So now we're going to go to our ripple, and we're going to flip this smile upside down by making it 180. And I'll hit apply. And just see how it looks. Okay. That really didn't, give us the density that I was hoping for. And you say to yourself, well, maybe it's because my range is 45. Maybe it needs to be curved more downward. It's not going to follow the circle as much. Let's see. If I double this and make it 90, I'm just going to see what happens. I don't know for sure, but we'll see. Okay, that's interesting. So the density is more on the sides. So here's the other thing. It was at 45. Let's make it 22 point and hit apply. So now it's not going to be as curved, but maybe we'll get more density up at the top. I don't know. I mean, yeah, we do, but it doesn't look like the eyeball. So the other thing I could do is, let's go back to the 45. Enter, enter. And trying to think. Scale is at 80. I could try the transformation now and take it off. So let's go back to where it was at 45. So now the design, instead of it moving up, I could try and take this off so that this might move down. You don't want to make this a negative because I noticed that really locked up the computer. So I'm just going to make it 0. I mean, I don't know if it always locks it up, but I'll just hit apply and see. Because now, you know, we have the smile flipped upside down. I shouldn't have a gap up here. And I don't. It did get a little bit tighter, but it doesn't look anything like the eyeball. So I'm going to go back to the 10. And I'll flip it the other way. Back to 0. I just really liked that. I liked that look. So I did change 2 variables at the same time. I'm just getting back to the eyeball. Okay, there it is. So that looks really cool. I really like that. So here it is down here. And let's see, my perspective was at -100. What was it that I made different up there? My scale was different. So my scale up here was not at 60, but I believe I put it at 80. So it was a little bit more dramatic. If I zoom out, you could see it's wider here and it's more dramatic of a transition than this. These are closer and it transitions better. Let me guides, erase. Okay. I can click on this and Control C, Control V. And if I click edit, since I copied and pasted it so many times, who knows where my edit's going to be. But I'll click. Let me just make sure I have 2 of them. Okay, and that's the one here. Sometimes, shoot. See, I don't know why it got rid of the other one. Okay, oh, I know why. Because when you do Control C, Control V, it's not like in Studio Regular. It actually has them both selected. So you have to just click on one, you know, click outside and click on one and then move the one. So if I click on, so this is the one that's at the bottom. It doesn't matter, it's going to move back where it wants when I edit it, but just so I know, this is the one I'm going to edit. And then I'll click, this was an Embird text, edit text. And when you click edit text and you see this on the side, then you'll know that this came up. But sometimes this is, you know, off the screen. So you have to zoom out to find it. When you click edit text, that's when you copy and paste it. So my scale was 80% on this one. And see how I'm clicking and nothing's happening? If you use your arrow button and then click, oh, actually it's making me do it. It's making me go all the way back. First time, and then hit backspace, and then 8. Now it seems I can click where I want. Once I do it once, I don't know, it's like a bug. So anyways, I put that at 80%. I'll hit the check mark up here. And now when it finalizes it, it edited but kept the last color I used, and also it's not grouped. So right away, come over here, group, right click, group. I'll just hit group 1. And it's grouped down here. I'll click more. This is my black. Now I'll just drag it over there. And now I'll drag this up. I'll just put it right here next to it, so I don't have to waste more space up there. So the only difference between the two then, let me go back to Inspector, is the scale of the actual design was at 80%. And this one was 100. Let me make sure that was the difference. And again, it's not showing. Let me hit done. And there it is, mesh. Yeah, my scale was at 80. Everything else was the same, 10, negative 100. Okay. So when I came down and I used this setting here, the scale at 60, to do my Mickey down here. Well, let's see, I did it 2 different ways. Now you could see the difference in the Mickeys. So here's the fill, and there's no underlay. Here's the custom ESM. These are the settings up there for those. And this was the first Mickey I did. Now it looks like I used perspective of 100. So the density is down there because this is positive. My scale, which is interesting, on this I used a scale of, is that 30%? Let me zoom in. Yeah. So to get it to look, tighter, I had to go all the way down to a scale of 30% because this is a complex design, not complex, but more complex than a circle. So, you've got different things going on. And then my ripple was the same, 1/2 and 40 mils, angle 0. So my smile is, I have a smile, not a frown. And my ripple. My offset is 10 mils. So I still offset it. But I don't know if that's because I had a gap and I needed to move this up. I don't recall. I might have, or I might have just decided to just keep the same settings as I had on this one, these last 2. Okay. So, actually, no, it was just this last one. So on this one, my perspective was 100%. And on my last 2, I went 100 on the first one to have the density down here. and negative 100 on the second one to have the density at the top. And it looks like on this second one, I did my offset at 20 mils. In other words, I moved the design up more because maybe this darkness was covering too much of the ear when I had it just at 10%, you know, and flipped. This one's flipped. Maybe I wanted to push it up so I have just less density at the top. So we'll see. So I'll click on this one. And there it is there. I'll go into params. Oh, I want to be able to see it. Done. Wish they'd make this smaller. And you can't even minimize it. Okay, so I'm going to have to zoom out. Just to get that. I still want to kind of show both of them. So let's click on this. And I'll click params. Okay. Remember, if this right side is in the middle of this flat tab, then you'll be able to see your design. So my scale was 25% on this one, so I went even lower than 30. Okay, so that was the other thing I changed. And this stayed the same, but my ripple is at 180 so that I have a frown instead of a smile. So instead of it being angle 0, I did angle 180 to get the frown. 25. And then my offset was 20 instead of 10 in this one. Probably because I wanted to push it up so that I have more spread out down here and a more focused density at the top. So let's see if that's why I did it. Now remember, this is at negative 100 because the negative sign puts the density at the top and 100 stretches it out at its max. But let me put this at 10 and see if I get too much darkness up here, you know, too much stretch, too much vertical darkness, vertical density at the top if I put this to 10, and that'll jog my memory of why I used 20. Pretty sure that's why. So if I hit apply, watch this, and you may see there's a lot more darkness in the ear. So it really wasn't a big difference. I did see it fill in a little bit more. And like I said, this may have been a case where you copy and paste this first and then change it to 10. So you could compare the two. So I'm not going to hit cancel because usually when you have this window open and you hit cancel, it cancels two things. So it undoes or undoes two things, the last two things that you did. So I'm not going to hit cancel. I'm just going to hit this and do 20. And like I said, well, not like I said, but that could be a bug in the program. I don't know. So I'll hit apply, and I think you'll see that it focuses a little bit higher on top when I use 20. So I'm basically pushing this up. It is very subtle on this particular design. Now, if you wanted each of these to individually have its own gradient, yeah, that looks better. It's darker just right up here.